Hi everyone, welcome to the channel of DFTW English, a unique voice to reveal another side of world affairs. Today, we discuss the first face-to-face talk between the Chinese and American military chiefs. Since Chinese president and his U.S. counterpart held a video call, the U.S. has kept provoking China on the Taiwan issue by sending warships passing through the Taiwan Strait and selling arms to the DPP authorities. U.S. Congress members, with or without legs, visited Taipei, showing their so-called support for Taiwan's secessionists, constantly delivering wrong signals to Tsai Ing-wen and her followers. U.S. President Joe Biden had expressed America's commitment to Taiwan many times under different circumstances, as he had assured Ukraine with his support before the Russians took action against Kiev. Taiwan is not a country, but a part of China, so the U.S. does not have an official relationship with Taipei. However, it does not stop Washington from selling arms and sending delegations to the DPP authorities. Tsai Ing-wen and other Taiwan independence elements still have a delusion that the U.S. will help Taiwan militarily, even if Ukraine has been told to shed its blood to fight the Russians on its own. The DPP government does not want to face reality. The truth is that the U.S. military they count on has never won a military power by itself after World War II. Even the victory of World War II should not be attributed to the U.S., the UK, and France only. It could hardly defeat the German and Japanese troops, even with the help of the British Army and French resistance forces, without the former Soviet Union and China's sacrifice. The U.S. military leaders knew they could not stop the Chinese Navy in the first island chain, and the Chinese also knew it after the 2016 crisis, when the U.S. retreated its aircraft carriers to the east of the Philippines, failing to keep its word to Manila when China refused to acknowledge the so-called South China Sea arbitration. In the past several decades, the U.S. has spent too much time in the Middle East and Afghanistan without making any new destroyers for over 20 years. America's think tanks and the U.S. military have concluded that the U.S. Army cannot outcompete the Chinese People's Liberation Army in the West Pacific. When Joe Biden stressed America's commitment to Taiwan, saying the U.S. would militarily support Taiwan, the U.S. military immediately denied it would confront the Chinese in that region. At their first meeting on June 10, 2022, American and Chinese defense ministers called for more communication to avoid misjudgment and miscalculation. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met his Chinese counterpart for the first time in Singapore, and the two military leaders agreed on the importance of communication and reducing risk. Currently, the U.S. and China have a lot of opposing interests across many issues, with Taiwan as the primary one. These two countries are still foes, but the tension between the two armies seems to cool down a little bit. Chinese Defense Minister Wei Fenghe told U.S. Defense Secretary Austin that the two countries should not allow their differences to escalate to conflicts, calling for a healthy and stable major country relationship between them. A readout from the U.S. Department of Defense says that Austin discussed the need to manage competition and maintain open lines of communication responsibly. The U.S. military chief stressed the significance of what the People's Liberation Army is working on, improving crisis communications and reducing strategic risk. It is worth mentioning that Austin had been trying to have a direct talk with the Chinese military's deputy chairman, but China did not give him a chance, as his counterpart is Wei Fenghe, the Chinese defense minister. General Wei Fenghe is China's senior military representative, not the top defense official. The Chinese president leads the Chinese Communist Party's Central Military Commission, which controls the Chinese army. Austin had thought he was the top U.S. military chief, so he had asked China for a higher-rank official than General Wei to discuss military affairs between China and the United States. In April 2022, Austin and his Chinese counterpart, General Wei Fenghe, had an exchange via phone, and they met for the first time on June 10, 2022, at Asia's most prominent defense summit, the Shangri-La Dialogue. Because of the COVID pandemic, there have been fewer such high-level exchanges, and the Singapore summit was the first big summit in the past 3 years because of the global coronavirus outbreak. The meeting was vital to the relationship between the two armies, especially after U.S. President Joe Biden took an aggressive posture toward China and Japan during his trip to Asia. To divert his nationals' anger for his poor performance, Joe Biden concocted with Japan to interfere in China's internal affairs in Taiwan. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida delivered a speech that emphasized his concerns about other regional actors violating international norms, which alluded to no other countries other than China. The Japanese leader firmly asks China to act responsibly to build a constructive and stable relationship, hinting at China's military pressure on Taiwan. When the U.S. politicians and Congress members started using the Taiwan issue to showcase their anti-China stance to attract more voters for the interim election, the Chinese army began patrolling Taiwan with its warplanes, including J-20 stealth fighters, regularly. Taiwan has long been a significant problem between China and the U.S., and in the meeting between Austin and Wei, it is the most important thing on their agenda. General Wei Fenghe criticized the latest U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, a rebellion province claimed by Beijing as part of its territory. Because of America's interference over the past 7 decades, China mainland and Taiwan have not reunited, making China the only world power that is not a united country. The Chinese defense minister criticizes the U.S. for its recent arms sales that have seriously undermined China's sovereignty and security interests, asserting that it would be impossible for the United States to use Taiwan to control China. Austin called on Beijing to refrain from further destabilizing actions toward Taiwan. However, China regards Taiwan as its internal affairs, and the U.S. is in no position to interfere. General Wei Fenghe reiterated China's firm position on the Taiwan issue during the meeting, saying that if anyone dares to separate Taiwan from China, the Chinese military will not hesitate to fight and will resolutely crush any Taiwan independence secessionist attempts at any cost, and resolutely safeguard China's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The two military leaders also exchanged their ideas on Taiwan, the South China Sea, Ukraine, and other issues. Both sides agreed that the two militaries should earnestly base on the consensus of the two heads of state to manage risks and crises. The Chinese military chief reiterated China's firm position on the Taiwan issue, saying that there is only one China in the world. Taiwan is an inseparable part of China's territory, and the One China principle is the political foundation of bilateral relations between Beijing and Washington. General Wei Fenghe pointed out that the countries surrounding the South China Sea have the will, wisdom, and ability to deal with their interests in the region properly, but extraterritorial forces meddling in the situation is the leading destabilizing factor. The U.S. side should take practical measures to promote the South China Sea stability, not just create conflicts, provoke disputes, and exaggerate confrontation. On the Ukraine issue, the Chinese defense minister stated that China has always maintained an objective and impartial position and actively tried to persuade and promote peace talks. China will continue to play a constructive role. In addition, he warned if anyone wants to use the issue of Ukraine to undermine China's rights and interests, China will not tolerate it. In many videos, we have pointed out that the U.S. will not send troops to protect Taiwan if China mainland takes it by force, as the U.S. cannot challenge the Chinese army at its gate, thousands of miles away from North America. And the U.S. will not even provide Taiwan with as many weapons as it supplies Ukraine, as Washington knows the island cannot defend itself against the Chinese People's Liberation Army for long. All the made-in-America weapons will become gifts to Beijing. Moreover, China's Taiwan province will not pay a penny for what the DPP government has received from the United States. We hardly believe the U.S. government will accept Tsai Ing-wen and her successors' void checks, which the U.S. can never cash out after Beijing takes over the island. The DPP government is still daydreaming about America's friendship, but no one worldwide can expect it without paying a hefty price. When Taiwan's flat pocket is no longer attractive to America's arms dealers, the island's secessionists will realize how fragile American politicians' friendship is. Most Western politicians and Congress members are either business people or sales representatives, and Taiwan's DPP government is merely a buyer, nothing else. Thank you so much for your continuous support. Your precious time with us is highly appreciated. We do our work as a mission, a cause. Please help us grow and reach more extensive audiences by forwarding our content to as many people as possible. We publish videos daily and post long videos on topics viewers are interested in once or twice a week. If you have not subscribed to our channel or turned on the notification bell, please do it now, so you will not miss our new content daily. Please use the PayPal or Patreon link below, or scan the QR codes to support us.